Hello, everybody, and welcome. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Tim, or TMun. I'm presently the volunteer project manager for the Pathfinder 2nd Edition system on Foundry BTT, and I'm here today, as promised, to deliver an update on the modules that I personally use and why. The real power that Foundry has is that you can have so many modules to change the game to be however you want it to play. Remembering rule number 1 of Pathfinder 2nd Edition, it's your game. You can set the rules however you want to. The nice thing about Foundry is the system itself tries to adhere to rules as written as best as possible. However, we realize that not everyone wants to play necessarily that way. Foundry is built so that it can be modular and so that things can be overwritten. And so there are definitely things that I do myself. I'm going to show off the ones that I use, as well as a couple other extra modules that lots of people in the community use that sort of bring in extra options, even if I don't use them personally. You'll find that a lot of the staff developing the game, all the volunteers, we use very few modules. Again, that's partly because we developed the system, so we get to decide what goes where, but we also like the way that it runs just as it is with the level of automation that it has. Now, there are some modules that I'll show that sort of have things that'll eventually be in the system, but the way that they're coded right now is waiting for more on the back end to happen. So eventually, the system does have this history of eating modules and building it out as part of core if it belongs there. There are some things that I'll show that just will never actually be in the core software. So why don't we begin? I will let you know that there are more modules on my computer than I use. That's because I use this for demos and other things, and there are sometimes things that I want to show off. But why don't we look at the module list that I have open and what I've got toggled on. So the ones that I'm going to go through today, the Cautious Gamemasters pack, DF Curvy Walls, Dice So Nice and Dice Tray, Health Estimate. These two are libraries. You can sort of ignore that they exist. They're just helper modules that enable other modules to do things. I'm going to skip over the token pack. I just have it here so I can have some cool art. Highly recommend buying it. Makes everything easy, but if you're buying premium modules, it comes with all the art. Not necessary, but it's kind of fun if you just want to throw a random monster in. The Companion Compendia. This is one that, thanks to everyone's charitable donations, will be eventually eaten up by the system over the next year. Exploit Vulnerability. It's one if you only really need if you have a thaumaturge. Keybind Menagerie. Modifiers Matter. The Toolbelt and the Workbench. Neither of these I actually use myself, but they are so popular in the community, I would be remiss if I did not present them. Polyglot. Another one that I don't use, but a lot of people do. I do have it on for my Pathfinder Society games is Pop Out. Quick Insert, it's helpful. I don't really use it so much, but it is worth showing off because it does give you a keybind and an alternate way to search. I just mostly use the built-in search now. Socket Lib's another library, so I'll skip over that. And then Token Action Heads Up Display. Again, another module that I don't generally use, but when I run games, I do typically have turned on. So you can see during my actual games, the ones that I run, I'll turn off things like DF Curvy Walls, some of the libraries will turn off. So I run about 12 or 13 modules, depending on the game. If it's Pathfinder Society play, I'll have a couple more. So why don't we start off with the Cautious Gamemasters pack. There's only one feature that I personally use in here. It's just something because I always forget, and I hate when we break character when we're playing. So if we go here into Cautious Gamemasters pack, the thing that I set is the GM speaker mode. Disable GM speaking as player characters. A lot of times I will have a player character selected because I just apply damage to them for some reason, and I want to type something in chat as a reminder. So it's really, really weird if it pops up as a player character saying that. So this setting here turns that off and doesn't hurt anything else. So all it means is that if I have a player's token character or player character token selected and it's assigned to another player, if I type a message in chat, it won't appear as that player's name. It'll just say my name or Game Master. Curvy Walls I have on whenever I need it, which means I'm walling a map. It adds a whole bunch of these extra buttons to creating a wall. It's a little bit finicky to use when you start, but you can essentially make yourselves a circle, and there you go. Once it's set up, you can make it a tighter circle, you can make it a little less rigid, and when you're done, you just hit the check mark, and now you've built a perfect circle. Way easier than doing it built in. If you do start moving points, this does interpolate and puts it on spots that don't exist in the pixel subgrid. So if I start moving around one of the points, very, very slightly, chances are it won't end up at the exact same spot, and I can't quite hit where this was before. So it'll get close, but you'll see now that looks a little bit weird. So if you start adjusting walls once you've dropped it, that's one thing to know about. But it does give you lots and lots of power. to be able to create lots of different types of walls. So I like it because it makes it faster to do some of the walling. There are the features, but that's primarily the one that I use. Again, this is a module that I'll turn off once I'm done walling a map. So it's just sort of on to do its function. I'm really hoping someday that'll be part of Foundry Core, but for now it's not. And this module does an amazing job anyways, so there's really no rush. Next we have Dice So Nice, one that I'm pretty sure everybody is relatively familiar with. It's the one that gives you 3D dice. I like it because it gives a visual. I will highlight that there are 3 built-in options for Pathfinder that were contributed by a member of the community. So there's a basic theme, there's a campaign theme, which is sort of this white, and the one out of the 3 that I like best, which is the Dice Finder Dark Mode. Again, I just like the dark colors with the gold. It'll put in hero point tokens for doing coin flips. Very, very cool. So it's just one of those things that is added in. It's part of the Pathfinder system, so you don't have to go anywhere to install this. The system itself has these 3 dice skins. They just exist there if you don't have Dice So Nice installed, but if you do, you can use them. And then we can do a test roll. And so it just makes the 3D dice pop up. I don't use any of their features, but let's say you want to restrict the rollable area so that maybe it only goes here, doesn't go over the map, or you just want it in a corner. So you can sort of adjust where the dice are going to fall, so they'll never be outside of the bordered area that you have. So now if I try and roll my dice, oh, there we go. Now if I try and roll my dice, it'll only stay in there and it'll shrink it all down. Normally I'd set that back because I don't like it. Oh, well, why don't we? It's my stream. I can take a minute. Next up, Dice Tray. Dice Tray is a handy little module. It adds these buttons down at the bottom here. I just like it because it's easy. Yes, it adds fortune and misfortune. Not really a part of Pathfinder 2nd Edition. It's not particularly built for us. It's meant to be more agnostic. But if you want to do a D6 plus a D4 plus 2, it's just easy enough to use those buttons. You roll it. There you go. Does the math for you. Then we have Health Estimate. Health Estimate is a fun one. I just use it as default, but it's nice to know how characters are doing so players can see how harmed someone is. If you do a little bit of damage, you get barely injured. We can get injured, badly injured, near death, and then dead. And so players on hover will be able to see how damaged something is, either the other players or the enemies. So they get sort of a visual representation, which kind of makes sense. You'd know if something you've damaged pretty heavily. You can set it. There's a lot of people who like using the older rules where you sort of have bloodied and not bloodied. And so this can just show you once the character's gotten bloodied. There's lots of cool stuff that you can still do with that as well. So something worth exploring. Again, I use it simply to give players the idea of how damaged either their friends and allies are or how damaged their enemies are. Next on my list, we have Exploit Vulnerability. I don't have a Thaumaturge out here. If you don't have a Thaumaturge, just turn it off. If you do have a Thaumaturge, then there's a whole bunch of cool stuff that you'll be able to find. So there's the Exploit Vulnerability macros and the different effects that can exist. And so you can use these to sort of help out, play around. If you're a Thaumaturge character, these make it much more fun to play so that you can actually exploit vulnerability on an enemy, and it just works. Eventually, something like this will hopefully be built into the system. Right now, this is a little bit hacky. It doesn't work 100%, but it's pretty close. It's a well-done module. Then we have probably my favorite one, which is Modifiers Matter. Maybe someday this will get into the system just because it is such a core feature to explaining why that +1 matters in Pathfinder. But here we'll have Mauricio make a strike on the mid flip. And a natural 20 doesn't help. Let's try again. So there we go. We rolled a 7, which would normally be a miss, but because it's frightened and because it is flanked, it changes the degree of success from a miss to a hit. And so you get this sort of update, and then players will see that because they did something, it now has mattered. If everything that they did didn't matter because you just rolled a natural 20, then there's no additional notation to say, hey, because you did this, this happened. So fantastic if you have a bard in the party, if you want to show the bards contributing, if you want the bard to feel really good, Every single time one of those crits comes up from your fighter because the bard's inspired courage or applied heroism, it'll all show. If somebody runs in, one of the beginner box games that I played, the wizard ran in to provide flanking against the extra boss, and I don't want to spoil it if you haven't played it. It was enough that although the fighter was able to get up, come in, and because of the flanking, make the hit that took it down, and it would have been a miss otherwise. So it shows you that little bit of sacrifice, that danger, which probably would have killed them, matters a whole lot. And that's really the core to me of tabletop role-playing game, because that's where you get the storytelling. It's not always about the dice. The dice inform the storytelling, but it's about, what action did you do? How did it affect the world? And when you can see it come up in the text just like that, that's the most powerful thing I think a storyteller can have to hold on to. Next two we have are the Toolbelt and the Workbench. So I'm going to go into the management for them. Here there's a bunch of stuff. Automatic rune progression. If you want to play with a version where every weapon you pick up will have the rune that is prescribed to your level, this is a wonderful variant. This is probably what an automatic bonus progression should have been, but it's built in. If you want bulk to no longer matter when you drop it, there's a setting. If you want coins not to count for weight, there's a setting. It has a way to be able to trade between players. It incorporated an old module called PF2e Giveth. Lots and lots of options that you have here to be able to use. So definitely worth exploring. Again, I don't personally use it because it's not something that I want in my game, but there it is. And then we have the Workbench. Similarly, tons and tons of quality of life settings if you want it. The only one thing in here that I've used on a regular basis in the past is the hero point reminder. It was really good to train me as a GM. I don't really use it anymore, but now there's all sorts of cool features that are built in. I could do a 20-minute video literally on just what this module adds. In any case, there is so much in here, including all of the Workbench macros. So lots of cool stuff that you can do or add in. This can customize the Workbench itself. Lots of items that you can add on. So the different adjustments that exist. Again, hopefully something that will eventually be part of the system. Auras, there are now some of these that we can and are starting to do in the system because there's certain clarifications coming out with the remaster. So likely it'll move to the system and no longer be in here. And then a couple of extra effects that just really help with gameplay and remembering things. And then a couple of macros. The cool one for new players that I would highly recommend is the basic action macros. And what this does is it shows you literally all the actions that are trained or untrained and the modifiers for the player that's selected. So right now I've got Mauricio selected, so I get this. If I select Kyra instead, I get a different set. So you'll see because she was trained in more things, I would get more things that sort of made sense to roll. For everything that you can roll where Kyra is now trained, you see that those are now appearing as blue. And if I remember right, it changes based on your level of proficiency. So if you become an expert, master, or legendary, those things will show up in those colors here. So for new players especially, super helpful and handy. And this should trigger most of the macros that are built into the system itself. So it works really, really well. Lots and lots of cool stuff that's been provided here. Next up, we have Polyglot. This one I particularly like. This is one, again, that really helps with the immersion because I can take the Mitflit. And the Mitflit only can speak Undercommon. So the Mitflit can say hello. Players will see what's on top, and the GM will see the translation that's in the bottom. If one of the players does understand Undercommon, they'll see the translation. If the players don't, they'll just see that. Wonderful way to sort of just make it work. Pop out. Again, one that I don't use, and I don't know that I can demonstrate it here because I'm on the desktop client, but yeah, so I can't pop it out. But what it does is it moves it to a separate window for you. Lots of things that you can do from here. I will caution you that once you pop it out, it's no longer tethered in the same way back to the system. So if you do pop it out, some things might break, you might not be able to roll. So it's much better for a reference if you want to drag your character sheet to the side. But don't expect everything to work perfectly if you pop it out, just because that link doesn't exist. And that's sort of a core Foundry issue, I suppose. Maybe at some point it'll be enabled, but right now, because of what Foundry is, it's literally just a web server. There are limits on what it can do and what it can handle. So this is sort of a half solution to that problem, but it's not complete. Quick insert. Quick insert, you just hit Control Space, and then you can search for anything that you would like to look for. So we can search for Mitflits in the season. So you can see there's one in Bestiary 3, there's one that I pulled into the actor directory, or actually two of them, or things that are otherwise spelled pretty closely. My personal preference is just to use my compendium pack search. It gives me a little bit more accurate results. The quick insert will do sort of searching that's a little bit more expansive. So if you just remember that you wanted a type of potion, then it'll sort of try and guess. With us, it'll sort of just list things alphabetically. Different ways to approach it. It was amazing for data entry, realistically still is. A lot of the times, however, now I literally just use this because I can pop out and do my searching right here. Exact same way, just an extra click or an extra step. Then we have token action heads up display. There's for Pathfinder 2nd edition, you need the core as well. What it does is it creates the bar at the top of the menu, which I've somehow disabled. Oh, well, normally there would be a bar up here. I don't know what I did. Oh well, in any case, you get a bar of things that are easy to select. I don't use it a ton anymore. I used to use it a lot when it came out. It integrates decently well, but most of the time I just hit C and pull up the character sheet, or P and pull up the party sheet, and that really has almost everything that I need myself. Last but not least, this is one that's a module that does something a little bit different, the Keybind Menagerie. So the Keybind Menagerie, what it does is it creates settings for a lot of things. I can't use P anymore. This is an old setting, so I've moved to O. And these are just pretty much anything that you want to do. You can create a toggle for it that's built in. If you have a Stream Deck, you can link the Stream Deck keys. And yeah, so there's tons and tons and tons, pretty much every macro, everything you could possibly want is linked in, 127 different items that just help. Again, I like using one that can pop up art. It pops it up to all players. By having it really, really close at hand, I can just select something and say, oh, you've been come across by this creature, and then start to describe it, and the players visually see it. They can close it and go back to the encounter that they're in. That being said, these are just the ones that I use. There's lots out there. Lots of people are welcome to disagree and use whatever you want, because again, that's sort of the point of the Pathfinder system. Rule number one, never forget it. Play the game you want your way. Do I think you need a ton of modules to get there? Absolutely not. The system does a lot. The system's adding more and more in every single release, but some of these helpers are pretty cool and can really add to the game. The best advice I can give you if you're starting out, start with no modules, start running a game, see what you're missing, see what you want, see what you like. These are the ones that I use. The wiki has a couple other recommended ones. Hopefully you now understand why I use them, because when people say, oh, you should use this module, the important thing is to know, what does that module accomplish it, and why does it do it? Why do you want that for your game? If you just go and start installing lists of modules, it's going to take you forever to try and troubleshoot. Oh, there we go. Here's token action heads up display. It's just decided to reappear. So there's Merciel, all of her strikes and attributes, skills, everything can be rolled from here. So that's all I have. Hopefully you found this an interesting update. You'll see some have fallen off what I used to use. There's a couple more here that I could describe in depth. Again, I just don't use a whole lot, but there's a whole world of modules out there to discover. So go figure out your game and have fun.